The Indianapolis Colts have some uncertainty on their roster going into a pivotal 2026 season. So, which players have that following them the most? Can these names nullify any skepticism about their future that some of us may have? And which players do you, the fans, feel have the murkiest situations? Well, we're going to talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast. Welcome back to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast after a 2-week hiatus. As always, presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. My name is Drake Wally, host of the show, co-deputy editor for the channel, or deputy editor if you really want to fluff it up. But yeah, for this episode specifically, we're going to talk about 5 Colts players who, a couple of these are going to be hot takes, but we're going to discuss 5 of these names whose situations and whose outlook on 2026 could shape their future with the team as soon as this year. But guys, I didn't even announce this because I just wanted it to be such a surprise. We have a special guest, first time on the show, and he is actually my co-deputy editor with me, just kicking so much ass on the channel. And I felt like there was no better name to bring on to this show as a special guest. We're going to see kind of how things go. He might become the permanent guy, who knows, but he is the one, the only, I call him the superstar in the making, Sean freaking Ackerman. Dude, Sean, welcome to the show. Everybody, you've never seen this guy's beautiful face before. He's got way better hair than I do. Yeah, man, Sean, introduce yourself to the fans. Tell them a little bit about yourself, what you've covered, how you got here. And yeah, man, I'll give you the floor. Everybody, welcome Sean, please.
Hey guys, what's up, everybody? It's my first time on here. I've been working alongside Drake. Well, I've been working at the site for a while now, probably over a year, well over a year, almost 2. And, it's fun to work alongside Drake. In September, I took over as co-deputy editor alongside Drake. I just graduated from Western Kentucky University last summer, so I'm just trying to, I love Colts football. It's fun to cover sometimes. It was fun to cover for the first half of the season, but excited to get going.
Yeah, man. Well, we're very happy to have you. I know that Paul Wilson down there, one of our best, one of our most loyal listeners, watchers, whatever the heck you want to say about Paul. He's read your stuff. Guys, you may not have noticed before he became the co-deputy editor after Jake Arthur's departure to Roundtable to do this for them. But Sean is an incredible leader. He's a young talent that one of these days, his star just keeps going. So I'm very, very happy that he is on the show here. But we'll jump into a few comments here. Drake the man. It's more like Drake and Sean the men now. But thank you so much, Marquise. What's up, Tony? Good to see you. We suck. Hi, Drake. Both of those things are true. You're saying hi to me, and the Colts kind of do suck a little bit, Paul. So you nailed it there. And it's actually SEAN, Marquise. But hey, you know what? We'll get there. This is Sean's first time on the channel, and I'm sure that you've gotten that a lot anyway. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to jump into 5 Colts players whose futures may be in doubt. Now, Sean, there's some names that are very clear. There's some names that are very, hot takey. And then there's just guys that, are well established on this roster that just had kind of a weird feel in 2026, or they didn't really, they really didn't play up to par. So just overall, I'll ask you this for your first question and answer on this show ever for you. What was your overall just feel from the 2025 season, and what did it kind of get? What vibes did it give you heading into this one, where they have to win, or else Ballard and Steichen's asses are out of there?
Going into this season, I imagined that that's what the case already was. It had been for Steichen. I feel it's more confusing. The first season, he almost makes the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. You see that his offense works. And then at the beginning of this season, you see how it works with a decent quarterback under center, And that's not to say Anthony Richardson isn't decent, but Daniel Jones provides a ton more consistency. And so now going into 2026, it's gonna be, if the Colts re-sign Jones, the price tag's gonna be up there. It's gonna be like $30 million. It's coming off an Achilles injury, it's tricky to rehab from that. So I think really it all boils down to how well can Jones play in 2026. And so, the season, it's hard to consider it a success. It almost got to the point where anything that could have happened, it would still be a success as long as the postseason was made. And now you're looking at a year where you have to make the postseason again, but do you let injuries, if injuries happen again, do you let them reconsider like what happens after the 2026 season? At what point do injuries become negligible and you just have to push them to a side and say the results aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, just in brief here before we dive into it, I love what you said. That we won't get into a rabbit hole here, but you bring in Daniel Jones. There's not a lot of expectation there because he just looked awful in New York. But then again, now with John Harbaugh, maybe they actually will be a real football team and not bury quarterbacks in the cemetery like they always seem to do. But then of course Richardson can't beat out Jones. You initially think that Steichen's just saving his job, and then Jones goes out there and looks fantastic. And so, like you mentioned, man, these injuries, they absolutely destroyed the Colts. And it all started with that fractured fibula where he was limited in his movement. Defenses were like, we got nothing to worry about with Jones's feet now, and he can't make the throws he was once making. So they were just able to absolutely tee off on Jonathan Taylor, load that box, blitz, man coverage, force Jones to make these quick throws. And it did not pan out well. And actually, before we jump in here, we'll kind of break this down real quick from Paul. Jones's injury history is so troubling. So Paul, me and Sean will kind of discuss this really quick. But Daniel Jones's injury history, a lot of people kind of just looked at this Achilles injury and they looked at the fractured fibula and it gets overlooked. But torn ACL in 2023, multiple neck injuries and a pinched nerve 2021 and 2023, fractured fibula in 2025, Achilles tear in 2025. He's also had multiple hamstring and ankle sprains. So I guess what I'll ask you real quick before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this is, like Paul said, it's concerning. Are you concerned with all of those injuries? Because people talk about Anthony Richardson, man, but dear God, Daniel Jones has failed to play a full season quite a bit and has missed a lot of football.
Yeah, and I will say I think some of that comes back to, his first season or his first few seasons, he's getting beat up because the Giants' offensive line wasn't great. But at the same time, you look at his injury history, it's very comparable to Anthony Richardson's. And you talk about injury prone. I mean, Anthony Richardson has probably had more injuries in a shorter time span. Mm-hmm. But when you're, rehabbing from torn ACL, torn Achilles in the span of not, too long, your legs are going to give out at least a little bit quicker, which I do think that has added a layer to these contract talks, is how long can Jones be mobile? Because I think his escapability in the pocket was a key part of the Colts' success this year. Last year the backup was Joe Flacco, and so Flacco wasn't able to get out of the pocket, and we saw that, but he was able to make the throws that Steichen wanted him to throw. And we saw what happened when Rivers was back there. Rivers wasn't able to get out of the pocket. Jones's escapability and extending plays, how much longer can he do that for coming off a torn Achilles and having this lengthy injury history?
Yeah, I mean, when it all comes down to it, I didn't put Daniel Jones on this list, just full disclosure, everybody. In fact, pending free agents, I tried to stay away from those because, you got to make a decision, and they're technically not Colts right now because they are pending free agents. But I don't know if you have a bigger wild card Assuming he gets re-signed, I cannot imagine without a first-round pick they're going to go elsewhere, and I can't imagine they're going to turn to Anthony Richardson unless all hell freezes over and the guy actually looks like a starter. But like Sean mentioned, I mean, I definitely think that's probably the biggest feel, and that's going to shape 2026 the most. But we're going to go ahead and jump into this. So the first guy that I had on this list is a guy that I didn't want to put on this list, and I wrote a piece on 3 players who have the most questionable futures. And it's Michael Pittman Jr. This is the first one. In short, this was because of just a really steep drop off. Had 6 touchdown catches, looked great before that Week 11 bye. Once he came back, though, from that Week 11 bye to face the Chiefs, you had a hampered Jones, and he just looked like a complete shell of himself. Then you have Alec Pierce go out there, and regardless of the quarterback, it just didn't seem to matter. He was still making plays, has over 1,000 receiving yards on over 20 yards per catch, leads the league in that metric again. Before we kind of get into the numbers and everything, what was your opinion on Michael Pittman Jr.? Because there was also an interview at the end of the season, Sean, where, he basically said, paraphrasing here, I can't tell the future. I hope that I'm a Colt. But it just seemed like a guy that was pretty dejected. And I mean, regardless of quarterback, I mean, he did not look – it was a tale of 2 seasons for Michael Pittman Jr.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that interview he gave at the end of the season, because I'm pretty sure he said that unprompted. Like, he brought that up by himself. He wasn't even asked about his future, because he has another year on his contract. So you're thinking, well, yeah, he'll probably be back. But then you look at the numbers, and if the Colts cut him, they save almost $20 million in cap space. So, Chris Ballard intentionally structured this contract so that if it came to this final year and Pittman wasn't going to be as big of a part of this offense's plans, they could cut him. And it's looking that way. I was expecting coming into the season that his numbers could drop a little. Another year of downs. You mix in Tyler Warren to the offense. It's just at the end of the year, Pittman was not an impact player. With Good Rivers, point. Which honestly was kind of surprising considering he was the only receiver that played with Rivers, out of all the wide receivers on the Colts offense. So it's surprising that Pittman didn't actually have some success and that Pierce ended up being the guy. But I think that shows that Pierce had another year of development, and Pittman showed that he didn't really improve his game as much. He was, I will say, a really big red zone threat in that one stretch. He had a really long touchdown streak going. So I don't know, I think his price tag this year, his cap hit is $24 million. That's what it comes down to. Is Pittman worth paying $24 million when you could go young in the draft, find another guy, or maybe find a cheaper veteran who could just, replicate some of what Pittman does?
Yeah, and so this is actually a damning statistic here. So just to kind of put it into perspective, his cap number this season is $29 million, but there's $5 million in dead money. So the Colts actually would save. This is insane. They would save $24 million in cap space by cutting ties with Pittman or just getting rid of him in some way, shape, or form. Of course, if it was a trade, they'd be able to get something back in that regard. But here's something that's very interesting. Of course, the guy at the end of the season, he was able to finish total with 80 catches, but it was only 784 receiving yards, and those 7 touchdowns were impressive. But the last couple games of the year, so once that losing streak started, Sean, this is something that actually blew me away when I was writing about it. So once that losing streak started, he was only able to secure so this is 7 games, 26 catches for 204 receiving yards and 1 score. I mean, that is just bad. It's not good. It's not necessarily all on Pittman. Of course, there were injuries to the offensive line. You had the rag-armed Rivers out there throwing the football, but it didn't seem to affect Alec Pierce. And then, of course, you've got, defenses taking away Jonathan Taylor. So things kind of didn't open up. But, before we kind of move on here, we'll do a little bit of this. We'll do a prediction. Do you think that the Colts, actually, I'll ask it like this. Do you think Michael Pittman Jr. has a future in Indianapolis? Because this one's interesting because that could be decided this year.
Yeah, that's the other thing is like, if he does stay another year, is he going to stay after that? I'm just not sure. And I don't know what his future price tag would be yet. He's entering he's about to play his, I believe, 6th year. No, this year was his 6th year. Next year's
7th.
Yeah. So going into year 8, how much would his price tag be? How much of an impact is he going to have on the offense? Are they just going to game plan for Pierce? The problem is, Pierce is what opens up other receivers. His deep, being a deep threat, it opens up the, intermediate, shorter areas of the field. And that's where Pittman usually thrives, is like yards after the catch and running those slants, running those like RPOs. So it's going to be interesting to see if Pittman stays. I think at the end of the day, if I had to guess, the Colts will probably move on from him, even though I love the guy. He's a great guy, and he's a great locker room guy, really good leader. And so I feel like that's another part to take into consideration. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, and I mentioned this, and I'll just quote my piece here because I do think it fully encapsulates the way that, say what you want about Chris Ballard, he does really value relationships. Of course, it's unavoidable, though. It's a business. The NFL is a business far before it's anything. But I said the assumption is the Colts won't do this, but it can't be ruled out. So your prediction, there's nothing wrong with that because you're pretty much right either way. But the NFL is strictly a business before it's an emotional investment. So I mean, if you can save $24 million, Alec Pierce had 48 catches and over 1,000 freaking yards. He was able to really turn it up as a red zone threat and touchdown threat at the end of the season when you didn't have Jones throwing the ball. You got Downs underneath. Doolin can possibly do something for you. And, of course, Tyler Warren is a blossoming Pro Bowl tight end in his first season. I would not be surprised, Sean, if your prediction comes true. So this next one has nothing to do with on-field stuff. It has nothing to do with a drop-off or anything like that. In fact, one of the 3 times that this happened to this player, it wasn't even his fault. It was a freak accident in a warm-up, and that's cornerback Charvarius Ward. Now, Sean, this one is probably the saddest one. But we've seen concussions and what they can do just by watching the Colts, and that was with Austin Collie, a guy that was playing well, looked great, but man, those head injuries took a toll on him to the point where the last one he got with the Colts, his arms were stuck in rigor mortis on the field, like he couldn't even move his arms. In short, what were your thoughts on Charvarius Ward this year? He only played 7 games. But he was signed to be a lockdown corner, and then more so when they made a blockbuster trade for Sauce Gardner. So what did you think about Charvarius Ward's limited time in a Colts uniform?
Yeah, first of all, I really feel bad for the guy. I mean, it's hard not to feel for him. He signed here after the death of his child in San Francisco, and that was another, super personal, super difficult thing to move on from, and he was hoping to get a fresh start here, and then he comes here and just immediately gets injured in week 1 with a concussion, keeps him out, comes back, or not a concussion, but he comes back, he gets concussed before the game, warm up, he's vomiting on the field. It's scary stuff, and it's nothing you can really overlook. It's I don't know, 3 concussions in 1 year, and it's hard to overcome that. I mean, that many trauma injuries. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to act like I'm a doctor. But I know that how much of an impact that can have on a player's health and how much of a risk it is to continue playing football after something like that. It's really scary, and I feel bad for him. he looked good when he did play. I have to say, like, he looked pretty decent. And you could tell when he wasn't on the field, specifically that week 2 game against Denver, when Xavier Howard was lined up and he was getting cooked. And, that game definitely contributed to his retirement thoughts. And now it's looking like another corner could retire. And it's terrible luck, really is what it is. But at the end of the day, you have to make a decision that's best for your health and safety, I feel like. So I wouldn't be shocked if he retires, especially with what he said, that his dad told him to consider retirement. I don't know. It all adds up to a lot. What are your thoughts? It's a sticky situation.
I 100% agree. And the saddest part of all this is, we'll go with a silver lining here. He's got a ring. All right. He's got a ring.
This is true.
He's got a second team All-Pro nomination from 2023. He actually led the NFL that year before all this happened with the tragedy of his daughter. Led the NFL in passes defended. He had 5 picks. I mean, he was just ruining receivers. You couldn't get away from him. He was just taking away so many passes. And once that happened, you saw a steep decline. And I mean, in the limited action he had with the Colts, and I'm going with PFF here, which I do have to always say this. I respect the hell out of PFF's grades, but you can't use it as a Bible. But overall grade, 8th among 114 cornerbacks. Coverage grade, 8th amongst 114 cornerbacks. Run defense grade, did that pretty well too. 21st, which for a cornerback, that's huge. Sauce Gardner's another overlooked run defender. But at the end of the day, this is going to be completely hinging on what's been compiling for him in his career. There's been tragedy. Now there's mental health concerns. There's possible future concerns. And all Colts fans know this all too well, Sean. When they saw Andrew Luck retire, right? Like, you're looking at yet another impact player that might not return. Do you think that he's going to call it a career? Because I'll go ahead and use my prediction here. I selfishly don't want him to, right? But I think that he needs to. I think he needs to prioritize that, because he's one freaking concussion away from it potentially ruining his life. Right?
Yeah. It's and I'm going to compare it. It's every concussion is different, its severity. So it's very different. But you look at Tua Tagovailoa, like, he suffered a ton of brain injuries, ton of concussions. He still came back. I'm not going to say it's impossible for him to return. But like you mentioned, another concussion, it's like everyone just adds to how big of a problem it's going to be in the future, And every hit he takes, every hard hit he has to make on the defensive side of the ball, those are going to add up. And sometimes you just can't avoid them. It comes down to luck. And if you're not lucky enough to, keep your head safe, then I'm going to predict. I think the words of his dad will really come into play with this, like what his family wants him to do. And if his family wants him to retire, I think that's going to be the decision he makes. As much as I hate it, because he was a really good player, and he is a good player. He's still a good player. He still has so much to offer. He's in like his athletic prime, and it's incredibly unlucky. I hope that maybe there's some way that these concussions, I just don't know. All the things he said about how he was nauseous for weeks, and I feel really bad for him. It's so hard to come back from that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's something to absolutely keep an eye on. Luckily, you can, because this is the other thing, is sometimes when you're starting to talk about football, you got to kind of throw to the side the health and be like, well, what do they do next, right? Like, if he does call it a career. Luckily, you did trade for Mekhi Blackman, showed some promise. Jalen Jones, he's kind of like been wishy-washy, especially this recent season. But, luckily you can get good cornerbacks outside of the first round. So we'll see what Indianapolis does. And that's going to be one of the biggest players to keep an eye on and how their future morphs. It's literally the only player on this list that's on here because of something that's outside of on-field stuff. So that's definitely a name to keep an eye on. This next one, I think that there are going to be some Colts fans that will shamelessly think this is great that I put this guy on here because he's been a wild card in the Colts community and has outright pissed off fans before, and that is Zaire Franklin. So Sean, I call Zaire Franklin a quintessential box score superstar. All right. He's a guy that will give you aesthetically pleasing numbers. For example, this season, if you just look at his statistics, you're like, well, damn, this guy's a beast. He had 125 tackles, all in 17 starts. For a linebacker, he had 2.0 sacks, which is good. He had 7 tackles for loss. He had 5 passes defended. He forced a fumble. Of course, last year he was on fire with fumbles forced. But the reason I put him on this list is because he is arguably, in fact, he is almost the worst coverage linebacker in the NFL. And I know that he has to go for a lot of tackles, but he missed 21 tackles, which out of 88 eligible linebackers is 81st. So the guy, other seasons, has also been horrible at missing tackles. So what are your thoughts on Zaire? Because if they were to move on from him, it would be more beneficial if they did it next year in the last year of his contract. They would save $9 million. So I would assume this doesn't have to be 2026 per se, right? I would assume that, he's going to really have a huge 2026 because numbers aside, I hate to say this, he wasn't good. I don't think as a starting linebacker, he was good. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you saw it throughout the losing streak. Quarterbacks would just target the middle of the field over and over and over again. And because they knew that the Colts linebackers couldn't cover their weapons. And the Colts played some really good offenses, some of the best in the league, and some of the best coached offenses in the league. And I think that all plays into it. But really, you just can't have teams know that the middle of the field is just, there for the picking. You're just going to throw it over the middle. Slants, crosses, deep overs, it doesn't matter. You have to have a linebacker that can make plays on the ball. I think Zaire, like you said, he's a box score demon. He's always there. He's racking up the tackles. He led the league in tackles like a couple years ago, I believe. I think at the end of the day, I think the Colts are going to move towards a younger player that maybe has a little more juice in their legs instead of keeping Franklin. I don't know if they're going to move on from him this year because, again, this is another player who's a leader of the defense. He's an outspoken guy. He's probably the most outspoken person on the team, in terms of his podcasts, which have caught a lot of heat. That's a whole nother part of it. I think if he just if he didn't talk as much, then Colts fans would probably like him more. But he makes a lot of claims that go against him in the future, and he just, Lord, like the Giants last year, the whole thing, he's like, the Giants are the worst team in the league, or, it's just, you can't say that and then give up 40 points, you just can't do that. So that's how you make fans hate you. But at the end of the day, I hope that either he takes a huge step in his coverage or the Colts focus on someone who is really good in coverage. I'm surprised they didn't use Jalen Carley's more at the end of the year. Or I don't know. What do you think the Colts are going to do at linebacker? I would predict that if not this year, next year, they move on from Zaire.
I mean, yeah, and there's a couple factors here that go into Zaire staying, but there's also some that go into him being replaceable. So what goes into him staying is it was an incredibly speaking of Jalen Carley's, incredibly disappointing season from Carley's. You saw some promise, especially being a former safety converted linebacker from Missouri. He was fantastic in coverage, no question about that. Still couldn't play all the games in his rookie season. This year, he's on IR most of the year. But dear God, when he comes back, he plays in one game and he makes one tackle, and he was mostly inactive, or whenever he was active, he wasn't on the field at all. And so you had guys like Austin Ajaki that stepped up in his role and saw more action. I think that that's going to play a factor in the Colts saying, well, if they can't fix that coverage spot at the linebacker position by 2027, I don't know if they'll re-sign Franklin, but I definitely don't think they'd move on from him. However, man, Jermaine Pratt got signed, and whether it was his familiarity with Lou Anarumo from his days in Cincinnati or not, that doesn't matter. He outplayed Zaire Franklin. He looked better than Zaire Franklin did. And in fact, in 2024, this gives people an idea. He was a solid run defender. He was pretty good at just overall defense. He did lack in coverage, but he wasn't an outright, like, disgusting liability. This year, everything as far as efficiency took a dive, not a dip, not a slight decline, a dive. And so I think if they can honestly get a linebacker, I think that they would pick one. If it's not edge rusher, they're probably going to go with linebacker in round 2. And then maybe address edge, or they'll mix and match those, I think, second and third round. I think Zaire Franklin could be a cut candidate in 2027, especially considering you're going to save almost $10 million, but that's going to be compounded even more if they can draft somebody or sign somebody. I just, we'll put a bow on this here. I think, Sean, and tell me real quick your thoughts on this. I think this is nothing against Zaire. I just think you can find better talent than Zaire. And I think that one of the biggest reasons he's stuck with the team is because of his ability to communicate defensively, and because he's, like you said, he's an outspoken leader. He does wear the C on his jersey.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you could probably find someone who at least has a higher ceiling than Zaire Franklin, even though, yes, he led the league in tackles a couple years ago. But again, the missed tackles were a problem, especially when EJ Speed was here. Them two together were missing tackles all over the field. Yeah. And with Pratt was, I think, his familiarity with the system really helped, and I think he showed that, and especially against the Chiefs. I was writing about that earlier today. He played really well against the Chiefs. He was all over the field. He was making tackles for loss, and he showed that in those big games he can step up in those moments. But again, in coverage, an issue, and Franklin is an issue in coverage. So I think if I had to guess, I would say they address it early on in the draft, and they try to find someone who is known for being a good coverage linebacker, someone who can be a gadget all over the field, get to the ball, make the big plays. I think that you just have to get some good young talent in there, and the Colts don't have a lot of that at linebacker right now.
Yeah, before we move on here, the fact that Sean brought up that Chiefs game, I'll go ahead and give Pratt's absolutely just insane statistics. He had a pass defended, but he had 20 tackles, 15 by himself, including 2 tackles for loss. There was not a bet, and he also had an absolutely incredible interception against the Jaguars when Lawrence tried to target him off of a wheel route. I mean, Jermaine Pratt definitely needs to be re-signed. I cannot imagine that's going to break the bank. Let me see. Oh yeah. Okay. Both Pratt and Franklin, depending on if Lou leaves also. That's interesting because I don't know, man. I think the Colts need to prioritize signing Pratt because you need help at linebacker. He's not going to cost a lot of money. You signed him to a $1.5 million deal, which in the NFL, that's like a Happy Meal, right? Like, so we'll see. We'll see what happens here. I think Zaire's got 2026 locked in, but his future overall, man, I think that you can definitely replace that guy. So this next one is, I think fans will be like, well, what? Like, why is this one on here? He was a rookie last season, but here's the deal, guys. This guy, I don't know if you had a more disappointing draft pick than this one for the Colts, strictly because he was in the second round, and that's JT Tuimoloau. Sean, you have a need for more at defensive edge. Going into this season, Latu was kind of looked at like, okay, he showed a lot of promise, wasn't, Jared Verse in his rookie season, but Latu had some incredible glimpses of a star in the making. And you have Kwity Paye, who is coming off of like an 8-sack season, but he's never really going to be that pass rushing demon. Ebukam, he's coming off of an Achilles tear. So you're looking at JT Tuimoloau like, hey, all right, we could maybe factor you into this rotation, but my God, not only did he hardly play, but he was not very effective as a pass rusher. He was not very effective as a run defender. And honestly, for a season where Paye took a step back, Lewis looked like just like a forever rotational guy, and Ebukam was a shell of himself. Latu was really the only guy, and Tuimoloau, man, he looked really rough. So this one's more of, I think his future is uncertain because he played so bad. I think anything can happen, but man, I would not be surprised if the Colts draft another freaking edge rusher because he didn't give him the confidence. What do you think? And I guess, what did you see in his very limited action on the field this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even properly analyze him because of how little he played. He only played, I believe, about a sixth of the defensive snaps, maybe even less. And really that came because of injuries to guys like Lewis and Ebukam and all those guys up front. And so he was stuck so far down the depth chart. I thought that the Colts would give him some more opportunities that he just never really played. And before the draft, before the 2025 draft, I predicted that the Colts would take Tuimoloau, and he just never actually played football. I think it's possible they go through the draft again and get another, but at the end of the day, you have to look at picks. It's just rough. It's pretty much just all the Chris Ballard edge rusher picks. They don't actually pan out. None of them have ever gotten double-digit sacks. None of the edge rushers he's drafted have ever gotten double-digit sacks in a single season. And I feel like that's a good bar of like, is this guy like great talent, like elite talent? I think Latu could get there. I think Latu looked better this year, but at the same time, Latu still has to take that next step. And I think I really don't know if the Colts are going to bring back Paye, Lewis, or Ebukam this season. They're all free agents. I'm not sure they're going to bring any of them back. So I think that Tuimoloau could get more reps next season. I think that he needs one more year so that we can really see if he's the guy or if he's a guy at all. If he doesn't get reps, I would expect then that the Colts had signed a veteran. If like there's guys like Trey Hendrickson, I mean, that's a name that has just continuously popped up.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. How do you see Tuimoloau developing in year two?
I like this comment right here from Wiley Relic. So I think JTT will be a season 3 jump player and will show flashes in his second season. The thing that makes me so concerned is that, like you said, okay, I fully believe that if they didn't have certain injuries at edge rusher, I don't even know if he would have seen the field even with the limited amount he did. He had so few snaps that Pro Football Focus couldn't even rank him. And he was a healthy scratch multiple games. And I'm just thinking, okay, maybe he's a developmental guy, but they did take him in the second round, probably saw those traits. As we know, Ballard's obsessed with those. But it just seems like he was so underwhelming and went so far below even the modest expectations you'd have for a second round pick that, I mean, like you said, I don't think Paye's coming back. I don't think Ebukam's coming back. I think if anybody is, it'd be Lewis because he'd be cheapest, and you want to still have some depth. But man, I mean, obviously they're not going to get rid of him. It's just the question here is, what's his future as a real difference maker, and so I don't know, man. I think that the power is there. He's a very powerful defender. He's almost 270. He's about 270 pounds as a defensive edge. So this is not a fast guy. This is a dude who's going to specialize mostly in run defense, which the Colts can always use. But I don't know, man. I think that there is a future for him potentially. But if they do sign somebody, if Latu jumps, if they re-sign Lewis and he resumes and outperforms JTT, or they draft a player and he looks more promising, it could end up being one of those guys that just, you swung too high on him and he turns out to just be a depth chart. You just stow him away, kind of like on your fantasy football bench. So I don't know. We'll see. That's going to be a big one. You know what? This is actually a really good point here from Steve. Is it Lou not liking young players that has followed him? That's fair, but Justin Wally was running with the starting team, and he was a rookie. Nick Cross, super young. He was a clear starter on the defense. I mean, there's guys that were young on that defense that Lou allowed to play. So that's actually a really good question. Do you think that factored in? Because while he is the defensive coordinator, he's much more of the secondary guru, whereas Charlie Partridge was in charge of the defensive line and he was atrocious, so he's going to Notre Dame. But do you think that could have possibly held back JTT? Because that is a thing that was following Lou around in the offseason, is he doesn't like young players.
I think that could be part of it. If that's the case, why use a second round pick on the guy? That's what it comes back to, is why spend that much draft capital on a player if it's hard to know what you have in a guy, before you draft him. But with a second round pick, you usually have a pretty good idea of what this player could turn into, most of the time. So I think, and like you mentioned with Justin Wally, like Lou talked about him all the time. He was talking about how good of a camp he had, how he was going to play as a starter. And so I don't know if it's necessarily he didn't like him because he was young. I think that could factor into why they didn't give him as many chances. But at the end of the day, the Colts had a ton of veteran edge rushers, and I think they were just all ahead of him on the depth chart. And JTT only played because of injury. So, it could be that maybe another team taps into JTT's potential. That's a possibility if he does leave in the future. I think he'll stay this year at least. I would be shocked even if JTT left in year 3, but we'll see. I just think at the end of the day, he didn't have what it takes to be an NFL pass rusher in year 1, a consistent player on the field. So.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how he develops, because the Colts just continue every freaking season to need help at edge rusher. So this is it for Ballard anyway, and the expectations are higher than they've ever been. So if he can't get it done this season, not necessarily JTT, but we'll see how things pan out, because he's going to have to do something with that edge rusher room, because it has been brutal over the past few years. So this last one before we get to the big news and rumor story is one that was completely unavoidable. It's going to take up the majority of this episode. Of course, we're going to try to keep it under an hour and try to stop around 8:05. But this could be, it might be an episode down the road, inevitably when he's gone. But that is Anthony Richardson Sr. has the most ambiguous future of any player on this roster right now. We'll just kind of jump right into it immediately. And before we dive into like all of the issues and the things that have happened that kind of indicate that he's potentially gone as soon as this year, what are your overall thoughts just on Richardson and kind of what he was able to do, not do? Like, what has just been your eagle eye view on his 3 incredibly underwhelming seasons?
Well, as we all know, he showed that he can make great throws. That one bomb to Alec Pierce is I would say one of the best throws I've ever seen a quarterback make. I mean, almost no human can do that.
Yep.
At the same time, you have to be able to stay on the field. And now, as we talked about earlier, we talked about his injuries, how his injury history is somewhat similar to Jones's injury history. But with Richardson, again, the whole last season, everything has just been so confusing. I feel like there's been no clarity of what's actually happening. Like Steichen will say one thing, backtrack it. The whole benching last year, the tap out, everything was so confusing. It's just, when you're a young quarterback, you would hope to have some stability, but he's coming in and out of games. He's playing at random times, random weeks. It's just, at the end of the day, he hasn't become what fans had hoped for, but I think that he could still be a quarterback for another team, as we've seen with Sam Darnold on the Seahawks. He looked like a complete bust in New York, but he is now in a Super Bowl. So it could just be that Indianapolis isn't the right situation for him. I feel terrible for the guy with his injury luck this year. That was a freak accident. And really, I think the Colts could have made the playoffs if Richardson was healthy, And so if, there is a reality in which Richardson might have won a couple of games, gotten the Colts to the playoffs, and then what happened if he won a playoff game? Then what do you do with Jones rehabbing from an Achilles and Richardson looked good? And so now it's just, but that didn't happen. He didn't get that opportunity to play. And now it's just looking darker than ever. His future is getting murkier by the day. And I fully expect the Colts to decline his 5th-year option.
Yeah. So just in a nutshell, so in the NFL, Sean knows this, and I'm sure a lot of the fans that watch this show know this too, but for those that aren't privy to it, there is no side of the football that will adjust to you faster than defenses. And Richardson came into the league. I mean, you got to think, man, 6'5", 250, 260 runs. I remember being at the combine and seeing him run that 40-yard dash, and I thought I couldn't believe it. And my first thought was, you have to run the card up and you have to take Anthony Richardson. You've got to take a chance on this kid. Looking back, I think we were all we had the rose-colored goggles on. He looked good, just a little under 60% of his completions in those 4 games. He had command of the offense when he was on the field. He showed an ability to lead teams back from a deficit, especially against the Rams, where they barely lost in overtime off a Puka Nacua touchdown. But defenses had a long time to look at his tape. And what they discovered was that if you mix up coverage, he can't read it. If you take away that deep ball, he struggles incredibly badly with short and intermediate throws. He can't layer throws over people. He has a propensity to bullet pass 5-yard routes so that guys like Downs have it ricochet off their hands. Going to that helmet tap out situation, Sean, when that happened, because I was such an Anthony Richardson guy, I was like, he's still young. He's still young. And then it dawned on me, they teach you not to do that in like junior high. You know what I mean? They teach you don't give up. Yeah. And then the Colts public relations team, and I don't even care if they're watching this, they were bums. They were bums for allowing that guy to go up there and not give him better advice. And maybe they just didn't say anything, but he goes up there and they ask him why. Even Zaire Franklin said, just lie. He's like, I told Coach Steichen right there, I was a lot of running I just did. I was pretty tired, and so I needed to sit out in that play. That probably made his teammates look at him like, who the hell are you? Like, to get off the field like that. I don't know, man. And then you factor in, I had it in my piece here. And these are just a couple. You got the AC joint sprain, an oblique injury, a hip injury, back injuries, ankle stuff. I mean, all of that factored in, and you had a golden opportunity to fill in for Daniel Jones. And you have to pull old man Rivers out of retirement. And then you finish the season with Riley Leonard, which, by the way, he looked good enough to take your position as that backup quarterback. Unless the Colts, Sean, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, unless they are, I don't want to say dumb enough. We're professionals, aren't we? We work for Sports Illustrated. I can't say that. Unless they want to really take a shot on his fifth-year option as a potential QB3, I just don't see it unless he just looks like a franchise QB out of nowhere. I just think his time is over. And I understand you mentioned Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold didn't have a season, man, where he had 8 touchdown passes, 12 picks, a 47.7% completion percentage, and also 9 fumbles on top of it. He was a train wreck, and this is just being honest since we are analysts and writers. It was the worst football I have physically seen a quarterback play in the NFL since Tim Tebow, and that is also who he was compared to. So do you think he's done? Because I'll just say it. I think he's done. I don't think he's a Colt after this season. I think they're going to trade him for sure.
Yeah, it was bad. And I do think on the ground, I mean, he has so much to offer. He scored a lot of touchdowns, especially in late moments like last season against the Jets and Patriots. But then you remember that's like the worst Patriots team maybe ever. That's the worst Jets team maybe ever. Like, these are bad teams. He made the winning plays, but at the same time, these aren't teams that are, jumping off the page. Had he won that Rams game in his rookie year, that was a good Rams team, and that could have been a promising win. But at the end of the day, like you said, his fifth-year option, I just don't see it happening. It makes zero sense, and it would be an increase in salary. It would be about, I believe it's about 20. He's projected $20 million is what a fifth-year guarantee for a quarterback would be. Jeez. For a tier 4 quarterback. So it's not good. It's not something that you look at and you're like, yeah, we can pay that to a player. That's a lot of cap space. And they would honestly, with Alec Pierce coming up, like that's probably Alec Pierce's money right there. So $20 million, over $20 million, definitely not worth it. I do think, as some of the comments have mentioned, that it'll be a trade. But at the end of the day, his trade value is not a lot. It's not even a day 2 pick. I think it's a late round pick. Man. I think it's a 5th, maybe a 6th round pick. And it sucks because it's really only a 5th or 6th round pick because he only has 1 year left on his contract, but it's a rookie contract, so it's cheap. A quarterback needy team. People have continuously mentioned the Vikings. And, that video of Kevin O'Connell after that game in 2024, when Joe Flacco played, he was trying to, give Richardson a little pep talk, say that, these guys still believe in you. I believe in you. I think that there will be a team that believes in Anthony Richardson. And I think there will be a team that believes in that guy, like, can throw a ball to places that many quarterbacks cannot throw the ball to. So, there's going to be a team that maybe trades a 5th round pick for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, and just to kind of cap this off, 2 things. The insanity, and I know that it's ad nauseum at this point because it's the only highlight outside of him absolutely destroying Jalen Mills from the Jets. I mean, it looked like something out of Madden. That throw, he's falling off of his back foot. He slipped before it. He didn't even wind up to throw that football. He just chucks it down the field, 60 yards to Pierce in stride, and it actually outpaced the deepest coverage the Texans had. I mean, the skill is there. It's just my concern for Richardson is it seemed like, honestly, if this ends up being his time with the Colts, this will go down as one of the biggest blunders of a team and a quarterback relationship ever, because then Steichen goes out there, Jones performs great. You almost make the playoffs with Minshew. There were moments where Flacco was able to win games, all of them far more accurate than Richardson. So we'll see. But yeah, it's a shame that they're probably going to get like a 6th round pick out of that. So, but to kind of wrap up the episode, of course, we have one news and rumor, and it's a doozy just because it was even baffling that he got an interview in the first place. But that is Philip Rivers, the greatest granddad quarterback ever to play the game. He withdrew himself from the Bills head coaching search. Sorry, what in the hell do I have going on with this thing? Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, I had a 10-second timer for that. Yeah, so Philip Rivers was interviewed for the head coaching position for the Buffalo Bills. Withdrew his name, of course. His son Gunnar he's one of the best high school prospects in the nation. He's a quarterback going into his junior year at St. Michael Catholic. They're in Fairhope, Alabama, where Rivers was coaching initially. This isn't really that surprising, but man, Sean, I'm not a fan of Cam Turner as a quarterback's coach. I think Rivers would just be so good in that position. And if Jim Bob Cooter ends up going to Philly or going elsewhere, or somehow getting a head coaching gig, Rivers could be a great offensive coordinator, especially knowing how well he meshes with Steichen. What are your thoughts on this? And, if this is inevitably, it's likely the last we've seen of Rivers in the NFL, what is your take on his return to football? Because it's got to be one of the greatest stories I've ever written about.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thought it was a joke,
That's
how much, that's how unbelievable it was. Yeah, like who wouldn't? I looked at my phone and I was like, this isn't real. It's just, and then seeing him on the field, it was just so unbelievable. But in terms of football mind, I mean, there's not a guy who has processed as much football as Philip Rivers is at his age. Like he lives and breathes football. He knows the offense. I mean, he literally runs Shane Steichen's, like a playbook similar to Shane Steichen's in his high school, And so it would be a really good hire if like a position opened up in Indianapolis, and I 1,000% believe that eventually Rivers will be coaching somewhere in the league. I don't see why that wouldn't happen, especially with this random head coach interview with the Bills. I mean, that is out of nowhere. I'm sure, what I believe is Josh Allen probably saw that Philip Rivers was still able to pick apart NFL defenses, and Josh Allen was probably like, let's just bring in Philip Rivers and see what he has to say, And that would be a great combination, even though Philip Rivers and Josh Allen don't have, very similar play styles. But Rivers is he's a football genius. So, if you hire him, and he doesn't work out, then it's fine. You can say you took a chance on someone who was a great player. You thought he would be a good coach. But at the end of the day, I definitely see him joining the NFL's coaching brass at some point in time.
Yeah, and, real quick here, this man was asked to come out of retirement, dad bod and everything, pot belly. It looked like a dude that, just came off the couch. Oh, wait, he did, basically. And I thought he was going to be destroyed. I was like, you're asking this man who already was having a little bit of arm strength issues in 2020 to come back at Lumen Field in the most hostile environment the league has to offer against one of the nastiest defenses you can find. And he immediately goes up to the line of scrimmage. And this is a lost start in the NFL. And I think that we realize just how much quarterbacks really need to grow mentally. He would just stop, take like point out the blitzers. He would identify the coverage immediately, and he knew exactly what they were doing. I couldn't believe it. It blew my mind. His mental game, it's almost as if he had never left the field. And then he went out there, balled out by all regards against the 49ers. It's not his fault. The Colts allowed almost a 50-burger in primetime at Lucas Oil Stadium. So I'm all for Phillip Rivers eventually coaching in the NFL. I hope the hell it's with the Colts, but my God, he really blew my mind. And I mean, that's got to be one of the greatest sports stories that I've recently seen. So, but guys, wait, hold on. Teresa has a great question here. So, Sean, who you taking for the Super Bowl? And Drake, go.
It's going to be a good one. I really think the Seahawks are a really complete team. I think Drake May is probably the better quarterback. I think the Seahawks have the better weapons, though. West Coast, I'm going to take the Seahawks, but I think the Patriots probably cover the eventual spread. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's going to be like a 3-point game.
Yeah, I will say that for the Broncos and Patriots game, just to put a bow on this whole thing, if Jared Stidham doesn't do Jared Stidham stuff and have that backward pass, if he doesn't, throw it off his back foot, almost an interception on 4th and 1, the Patriots, there's an argument they might not have scored. So I'm looking at what Seattle accomplished against an incredibly gifted Rams football team. I mean, they're just so damn good. You've got the MVP at quarterback, touchdown leader in Devontae Adams, the best wide receiver in the game in Puka Nacua. You've got a hell of a running back duo in Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, solid offensive line. Then you've got killers on that defense. And they destroyed the Rams through the air while Darnold has an oblique injury. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, he looked like actually the best receiver over Nacua. So I'm going with the Seahawks. Like Sean said, it's going to be a close one. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they kind of run away with it a little bit because the Patriots are very dependent on good defense. So the Seahawks just faced, I think, arguably a better defense. So we'll have to see. But yeah, we're both definitely going with Seattle. But guys, that is our show. Thank you so very much, everybody, for joining in here. And I'm not 100% sure on the content for next Monday, but we're definitely going to be doing this every week unless something crazy happens. But guys, thank you so much for joining. Thank you to you, Sean. You are awesome. It's almost as if you've been on this show like 100 times, dude. Like you did great, but thank you so much for joining. Go ahead and follow Sean on X. He's got great content. He's got great articles, hell of a writer, but also like the Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow Indianapolis Colts on SI on X. We have a brutally complicated tag that is @Colts_SI. Subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube. Click the bell to turn on all your notifications. And if you want to listen to us on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, I've got us hooked up. You'll have that uploaded as soon as midnight tonight so you can digest all this information. And if you don't want to watch it, you can just listen to us. So, guys, thank you so much. Hope everyone has an absolutely wonderful day, wonderful week, and we will be seeing you all again here on Monday of next week. And also, go ahead and survive this blizzard that's taking over the entire country. Talk to you guys again.